So, good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here, to be able to speak to you. The actual invitation was linked to me being the project coordinator of this wonderful Smart City Lighthouse project, Positive City Exchange, that we have together with, amongst others, the city of Limerick, which is also the reason why we cooperate so closely with Ireland. But I also wanted to take the opportunity to maybe, open up the question a little bit more and hopefully get a lot of very good responses from you on, we are doing already a lot, but we need to do much more if we actually are going to reach, if we're going to save the world, basically. There is a lot of very nice, concrete, detailed speakers after me during this day. So I wanted to open up some more general questions, which I hope we can discuss during coffee breaks, etc. I know you've seen and heard this before, but we can't stress it enough. Every one of us is, in our daily lives, we are doing a lot of work. We're doing great work on energy, mobility, ICT, citizen participation, water, waste, all of these things. We're working a lot, we're cooperating with others, we're sharing knowledge, but somehow it is not going to be enough. We're not moving fast enough. Maybe if everyone else was working the same way as we do, we might get there faster. But then again, I'm kind of preaching to the community here. We're all doing a lot of work. How can we make sure that gets out into society better, faster, cheaper, etc., etc.? One of the specific things that is about to come now, on the right-hand side, that the European Commission is going to have its new framework program for research and innovation, Horizon Europe, coming after Horizon 2020. There's going to be, amongst others, 1 billion euros for climate neutral and smart cities. 1 billion euros to achieve 100 carbon neutral cities. 1 billion, 100 cities, not going to be enough. At the same time, if Europe is reaching 100 carbon neutral cities by 2030, while the rest of the world is just going to hell, it's not going to be enough. We need to do more. And even for us, working with smart city projects, working with energy, working with transport, we know how difficult it would be to even get one city, let alone 100, to carbon neutral. And it's not going to be enough if we just work with, mobility and energy and buildings and, food and behavior. So we need to do more than that in order to get to carbon neutral cities. Because all of cities, all of society need to reach, all the sustainable development goals by 2030. So also within education and cohesion, within water, waste, we need to somehow make sure that whatever we know, whatever we learn in our projects also reaches all of those other maybe smaller municipalities, small companies out on the countryside without those big connections, the rest of the world. So how can we help distribute our knowledge faster and better to others? Not just how well we did on a specific project, but also where we failed. And maybe where we have tried 5 times and failed gloriously, and then the 6th time made it happen. And how do we distribute that entire knowledge, and not just that one thing that went well? Another thing I'd like to mention is that all of those things we've already done, it's quite well documented what goes wrong, where the challenges are. If you do technical projects, it's very seldom that it's actually the technology that is the problem. You can develop that, you can test it, you can make it better, but it's the business models, the regulatory frameworks, the risk. Businesses don't want to invest before they've seen proof of concept, but someone should go first to provide proof of concept. So it's basically money, regulations, legislation, governance, behavior, all of those things that are actually being a barrier to achieving what we need to do. And there's a lot of reports. I just picked out a few. There's a lot of European reports. There's national reports. When we talk to South Korea, India, China, they have similar barriers. The technologies might be different, the local context might be different, but barriers can be very similar. So, you know, we need to somehow find a solution for this. And the thing is, we've known those. So some of those reports are from the past 8 years of Horizon 2020. And each project, each new project starts with the idea that we know what goes wrong in other projects, we're going to do it differently. They start doing it differently, and within 1 year or 2 years, they do exactly the same mistakes. So we need to really, you know, it was said this morning in the introduction, cooperation, sharing knowledge, we need to really start to do that more, and also talk about failures. And some of the things, so we've looked across those projects, and we've looked across those reports, and some of the things we saw that seem to go wrong in each project, but where very little is being done about this, is, for example, everyone is talking about co-creation. We need people-centered solutions, we need to co-create, we need public-private partnerships, we need to work together with citizens, but it's always very much up to individuals driving this cooperation. It is, so there's no, or very seldom there are proper governance structures in place to enable this. There's very seldom regulations or business models to support this. So let's together, you know, there's a lot of experience in this room, let's try to figure out what works and what does not, and how can we put that into a more formal structure. Another one is appreciation of value. Very often, yes, economy, energy efficiency, increase in renewables in transportation, for example, relatively easy to measure. But if you go to something like quality, providing people with a view, access to green spaces, the opportunity to create a little community social gathering in your neighborhood, heritage being upgraded and transformed, those things are much more difficult to measure, and often they don't measure up into more formal procedures, into tendering contracts, etc., because they are so difficult to measure. Another one we see is if you do get a lot of data and you get them into a 200-page report, politicians, you know, they might get the report and they might not even look at it, or they might look at it, not understand it, and just make a decision based on their gut feeling or to whomever they talked 5 minutes before the meeting, simplifying a little bit, but, you know, very few people understand all that detailed data that we have access to now. But there are new solutions where we can visualize data, where we can make 3D models of cities, we can visualize data on top of it, we can play with it. If we can get these kinds of models to people's cell phone, the same you have SimCity or Minecraft, or, you know, if you can start to play with it, people would better understand different scenarios, different decisions and their consequences. So that is what we're trying to do. We have a lot of test beds, a lot of pilot projects. Each project basically starts with the intention that we're going to create something locally, we're going to test it, and then we're going to scale it up and replicate. And almost not a single project manages to do the latter. So we have very expensive prototypes locally, and then everyone again starts with the idea of, oh, you know, there's already a lot of solutions, but my solution is going to bind everything together. Next project thinks, oh, there's a lot of solutions. My solution is going to bind everything together. So everyone is reinventing the wheel. We're not learning enough from each other, and very few solutions are able to scale up and replicate. And then the last one, as I already mentioned, learning from failure. We are very bad in general about identifying what works, what does not, why did it not work, how could it improve. And we're definitely not good at sharing with others what did not work and why. So if we, for a next program, we would really like to see more of those types of projects. So usually when you have a project that goes on mobility or energy or so you have the technology first, and then you have, okay, we also need citizen participation and governance, and then ideally maybe something with humanities and social science, etc. So what we want to do is flip, and we want to put the governance, the participatory projects, we want to do the learning from failure, the replication, etc. Put that first, front and center, into a project. Hopefully we'll make it work. And again, if you have experience with this or you have good ideas, please let us know. Now, it's not all bad, you know. So we know that from the past 8 to 10 years, a lot of these experiences came up in different projects. There's a lot of people who know that it doesn't work as it should, and that we're trying to make a difference. Now, one of those projects is Positive City Exchange. And actually, there are several people, partners here in the room. Maybe you would also like to stand up and wave to people. Okay, not stand up, but wave at least. Good. Yes. So we have with us people at least now from, I think, Limerick, Sestao in Spain, and then from NTNU. I think Smart Empower is here as well. So, you know, we are working together with 7 cities in Europe, and then about 23 industry partners, a couple of NGOs, and 2 universities to try to change the things that I just mentioned. And this is one of those Smart City Lighthouse projects, so 5 years, demonstration projects, 20 million euros that we get from the European Commission. We have 2 lighthouse cities that are going to do the big demonstrations, so Limerick in Ireland and Trondheim in Norway. And then we have 5 follower cities, and who are learning from the lighthouse cities and who are going to do their testing as well in a couple of years. And basically, this is kind of what we're going to do. So our challenge is to create a positive energy block and then eventually a positive energy district. So basically, we want to create groups of buildings, small neighborhoods, scaling up to a district that generate more energy than they consume. That could be because of efficiency in energy or mobility. It could be because of renewables. It can be because of behavior or governance or any other solution. But in general, if you look at the energy consumption of the neighborhood, of the block, of the district, you know, so you should be able to generate more than you consume. And in order to be able to do that, regardless of whether it's Limerick or Trondheim or Sestao or any of the other cities involved, we need a combination of social measures, spatial measures, environmental measures, legal, economic, technical ones, and all of that together. So that's also why we're working together with economists and engineers and artists and citizen scientists and architects and planners and mobility experts and ICT and all of those combined to try to find good solutions. And there, of course, then the challenge is that you have a lot of good individual solutions. The thing is that all of them together need to somehow get into that one physical space, that one district, that one neighborhood, and the people living there, working there, need to get along with it, ideally. So in our project, we don't just, with the expert, devise a solution and then try to implement it into the district, but we work together with the local citizens, with the local stakeholders to find good solutions that are viable for exactly that district. And this afternoon, you will hear more about how we are doing this from Ms. Rosie Webb. There are, as said, there are many of the other partners in this room as well. So if you want to talk to any of us, exchange ideas, or talk about your own projects, you're more than welcome to do so. Now, I also want to show a few other things because, so we are not the only ones doing this. There are 17 projects that are doing similar things throughout the years. And of course, we learn a lot from each other. We're also trying to make common definitions. We're trying to improve certification, standardization, legal frameworks, etc. But we know also that we need to not just look at energy or mobility. We also need to develop solutions that are resilient to climate change, resilient to societal transformation. So some of the other projects we've done, for example, in Ramses, we work together with 8 cities, 4 European and 4 global, to create a transition handbook to make cities more resilient to climate change. Again, energy is a part of it, but it's not the only part. Very important is governance and transformation. And there we also worked with cities to look at what are the steps you take, how do you create the vision, how do you plan, how do you anchor it politically, how do you do a small test, how do you fund this, etc., similar to what we are now doing for positive energy districts. We have a similar project in Norway where we create planning instruments for smart energy communities together with local municipalities, where we again look at legal funding, incentives, working together with local stakeholders. So basically it's always a similar cycle. And again, I know that many other people are doing similar projects. So if we could learn from each other and bundle these and really showcase what is already being done, that would lead us much faster to good solutions. And hopefully it would also be able to inform the next framework program where €1 billion will be spent on cities, even more on circular cities, on energy, on mobility issues. So we need to make sure that we don't repeat the same mistakes, but that we know that we use all the local knowledge to actually get further faster. We don't just work within Europe. We know that other parts of the world need a transition very fast. If you can make that happen in China, in India, in Korea, that will have a much larger impact than in Europe. So we work together a lot with China, for example, looking at not just energy and mobility, but then also air quality, other consequences to make this happen. We've also created recommendations for Chinese government and then the European Commission of what should be the priorities for cooperation, for investments to create an impact on society. And very locally, we work together with our own municipality in Trondheim to create a university city cooperation, exactly with shared leaders, shared budgets, shared strategies to work together on our local situation as well. So we don't just go, halfway across the world to work with others, but also within our own municipality, using ourselves as a test bed on health and welfare, city development, innovation, childhood education, and of course then smart city across everything. This has then also become now a UN Center of Excellence on city transition. So we are, as of 1st October, we initiated this kind of center in Trondheim. There is another one in another Norwegian city in Ålesund who are doing this as the upper one, the digital twin of the city where you can transpose data and you can learn from visualizations rather than looking at reports. And we hope that, that there's a lot of these types of developments to come. One last thing, all of this together, basically we looked at all of our projects, what we've been doing with others around the world, and we thought, okay, if we could just define one new project that would take into account all of these things we've learned, what would we like to have as a project for the next years? And basically, this is what that looks like. So we want to have a project where we don't have energy and mobility and water and waste, etc., as work packages. We want to have governance, participation, decision support, value assessment, replication as packages, regardless of the type of sector we work with. And we want to support cities, industries throughout the whole process of visioning, anchoring politically, planning, testing locally, monitoring the results, implementing on a larger scale, and replicating. And, then learning and starting again. And basically then we are looking then to create local teams of public sector, private sector, citizens, universities, research organizations who are working together to do this locally and put together in a more global constellation different cities in Norway, in Europe, in China, India, working together in similar ways to achieve, to test and to achieve and to learn from those cycles. So again, if you're interested in working with something like this, let us know and we'll see if we can set up a cooperation. This is everything for now. I'm sorry, I know it's a lot in a very short time, but I just wanted to show you a little bit of the scope of what we do. And I hope that some of it is useful for you. And if you are interested, just let us know. There's a lot of us here during the coffee breaks, during the lunches for discussions. Thank you.